welcome to this episode, another episode in the Row.Team webinar series, a series where we've been chatting with various coaches and support staff and the occasional athlete from around the world of rowing. My guest in this episode is Simon Pennington, who's the Coaching Development Director at Pymble Ladies College, New South Wales in Australia. Simon has 27 years of coaching experience. You're looking pretty well on it, Simon. You don't look particularly troubled after all those years.
I'm feeling different to that.
All my hair is gone. You know, that's where I am with it. At least you still got your hair, mate.
Yeah, true. Lucky.
Okay, so 27 years in coaching is a long, long time. How did you actually start out on your journey in coaching?
I first studied a sports science degree, which was straight out of school, high school. So, and during that I had to do some coaching as part of the degree. So I picked it up pretty early. I was actually only 17 when I left school, so I was a bit young for my year. And so picked that up sort of when I was 17 and started coaching then and discovered that I really enjoyed it. And so whilst I was rowing at the same time, I only did about a season while I was rowing and coaching at the same time, and then discovered I was probably a bit better at coaching than I was rowing. So went down the coaching path and then just started at schools and a little bit at Sydney Uni Boat Club just as a volunteer coach for the first season or two, and then sort of started to become a bit more involved after that.
Okay, and when was your first significant professional step, as you would call it?
Probably 3 or 4, once I finished my university degree, so 3 years out of school. I was fortunate to be coaching some lightweight rowers at Sydney Uni when I was, and they happened to make the Australian under-23 team. So I was selected as a coach there for the under-23 lightweight 4 in 1997. And that was sort of my first big break, I guess.
Okay. 1997. Where was that under 23? I'm trying to remember that.
That one was in Milan, in Italy.
Yeah. I was actually at that one. Yeah.
There you go.
A long time ago. Yeah, that's going back a little bit. So under 23s, and then coming back to Australia after that. How did you start to gather some momentum as a professional coach?
That was a very steep learning curve, by the way. I was only 21, and actually one of the rowers in my team was older than me, so that was interesting. But we had a good time, and the crew did pretty well. And so I came back from that sort of quite exhausted for starters, but then quite enthused about coaching and getting stuck into it. So I kept going at Sydney Uni, and I was also coaching at King's School, the King's School in Sydney, which is one of Australia's sort of oldest, or it is the oldest school in Australia. Got a pretty long rowing pedigree there, and so I started coaching there as well. And yeah, I just was getting really enthused about it because I knew I'd sort of got some good runs on the board at a young age, and got really energetic about learning more about becoming a better coach, and just really dedicated myself to the task of becoming good at it. And that led to another Australian team in 2 years later, so the 99 under 23 championships. So and that was in Hamburg in Germany. And then after that I was sort of at a stage where I was about to get married, and my wife at the time wasn't that enthused about marrying a rowing coach for the rest of her life. So I, given the just amount of time I was putting in and not the amount of money that was coming in the door. So I had to sort of branch my career out a little bit, and I started just working in a professional job in the city, an office job, and while still coaching on the side a little bit. And so I did that for about a year and a half, and sort of kept going with that, and eventually came back to rowing in a more of a full-time capacity in a school setting. So went to Newington College in 2002 as the director of rowing, and then stayed there for probably 13 years, I think it was, and then over to Pymble Ladies College, where I am now.
Okay, so you switched over to teaching as well as coaching, yes?
Yes, I was. I did after that sports science degree early in my younger days. I did a diploma in education, so I was teacher qualified. So when I went to Newington, I started teaching, and I also did a Master of Commerce degree at the same time, which I'd finished sort of in the early 2000s. So I was qualified as a business studies teacher and commerce teacher and an economics teacher as well. So I did a bit of all of that and some PE teaching, and was also director of rowing. So
Okay. And you mentioned that when you went to Milan with that crew as a pretty young coach, it was a very steep learning curve. Can you recall any of the steep elements that hit you at the time?
sure. I think I was just firstly quite naive, and that was maybe one of the good things. It meant that I wasn't overwhelmed with the situation. So I kind of kept my focus on just making sure the crew got better. It was quite a challenging crew because we had basically one of my rowers got in and got knocked out of so that I had a pair of rowers in the crew, and then one of them got knocked out by another person coming in from the senior A team. And so it meant that, so basically only one of my members that I'd coached previously was in the crew. And so we had people from other states in Australia, and they had to move to Sydney. So we had a bit of a challenge just getting the crew together and being united. And I think that was one of the big challenges. And then the second thing was just the steep learning curve happened when we were fortunate to go to the Lucerne World Cup in '97. And so we got straight off the plane and raced, within a day or two of arriving, which was difficult as a lightweight particularly. But also just that experience of being around, the very best in the world and just my eyes wide open. I was fortunate. It was a post-Olympic year, so a lot of the Australian coaches were taking a little bit of a lighter load that year and took the under-23 teams instead of the senior A teams. And so I had some excellent sort of mentors on that team, and likewise in '99 I had some very good people around me from that are now, doing fabulous things in the world rowing. And so I learnt a lot. And I suppose probably one of the things I've always taken into my coaching has just been always open to learning more and never settling for, being sort of a master or an expert at what I do. I was just trying to look for the next best thing and taking information from where I can get it.
Yeah. And when we spoke previously, you mentioned that actually that list of people, senior coaches who were working, was a pretty strong list of people as far as I recall.
Yeah, so I think on that first team it was there was Noel Donaldson was coaching the 8, or maybe that was the '99 team, I can't remember. Tim McLaren was on there, Nick Garrett, Uwe Bender was in the '97 one, and lots of others. I might have left out a few people there, but lots of others. And we had a big Australian team over there in that '97 year. We were well funded that season after a really good '96 Olympics, and so it was just a really good environment for me to sort of get to know that stage of rowing, as I hadn't had experience as a rower at that level. So it was sort of my first taste of international rowing, and I liked it.
Yeah. Can you remember any wise words from Dono or Tim on that trip?
Oh, there's plenty of them. But I think probably the main message is, I think I was probably complicating things a lot at that age. And what they brought me back to is keeping, having your focus on a simple amount of things and getting those things very right. And probably Dono was, at the time, if you recall, that was the Awesome Foursome had just sort of that '96 Olympics. They'd come out of sort of nowhere and won that race in lane 6. And they did it, they were always sort of the do it easy, rowing nicely type of crew rather than rowing hard type of crew. And I think, coaching lightweights at the time myself, we had to do that. I had to really learn how to coach, how to row well and how to row efficiently. And, I guess Tim McLaren was always a very strong advocate for individual technique perfection, so he was good on just, highlighting the importance of skill and making sure that, that was a really core part of our coaching job is to teach those skills. And I guess the other part of it I learned, but maybe it took a few years for me to get it, was just the fact that you're there to coach the athlete, not just the rower. So coach the person in many ways, so, and I guess that took me a while. I was probably not old enough to get that, but I'm sure the seeds were sown for that idea at that sort of age, but it just took me a while to get to that in my own coaching.
Yeah. I remember as a young coach, I think I was just about trying to be one step ahead of the athlete. That's probably about as far as it got.
Yeah, I felt like that probably at that tour, but it was good. It was, I certainly enjoyed the experience, and whilst it was very challenging, I really grew up a lot, I guess, in that sense as a coach.
Yeah. So you're now in a role as a coaching development director at your school, correct? So you have a responsibility across all sports.
That's right. So the school I work at, Pymble Ladies College, is kind of widely regarded as probably the best girls sporting school in the country. It's the biggest girls school in the country, but also we have a really wide array of sports available to the girls. The philosophy of the school is, and it was set up by the founding principal, which was 104 years ago. So Dr. John Marden was the founding principal, and he had the concept in his mind that wanted to offer girls the same opportunities that boys' schools were offering, and that meant in sport, it meant academically, etc. But and so being a sort of forward-thinking person at that time, they bought a lot of land where the school is now situated on a large. So we've got lots of space, and we've got wonderful facilities, because the sport aspect of things is kind of woven into the way we do things. So it's one of the reasons why I work at the school, because sport is given a very strong priority, as well as many other things, but it's certainly a core tenet to what the school's about. And that means we're well, we've got a lot of options for the girls, which is a strength of the school, but it's also, it can be a disadvantage from an individual sports point of view. So we have 29 sports on offer, which is quite extraordinary throughout the year. And so it means that, and all of them are fairly well resourced in the sense that, there's a lot of full-time staff operating in each of those sorts of sports. And so it means that there's some internal competition in a sense to make sure that the best athletes try and do the sport you're looking after. And it also requires a lot of flexibility from individual sports, people who are running each sport, to allow for girls to do several sports at the one time. And I've had rowers in my first 8 who are doing at least 2 or 3, sometimes 4 other sports within that year. And, that requires some flexibility and some open thinking, and just being a little bit more understanding of the girls' situations than perhaps you might be if you were just running an elite program, for instance.
Okay, so have you had the experience in a school then, in your previous schools, where that the range of sports was a little bit narrower, and then you've come to this, or has it been similar in all of the environments you've been in?
No, the boys' schools I've worked in have been the traditional GPS boys' schools, which are kind of modelled off British public schools. So it's usually, there's say 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 sports available each term, or each season, sorry. And so as I was working through, perhaps in the 1990s, there was a narrow amount of sports available at those GPS boys' schools, and that's gradually increased over time as the world's changed and new sports get added to the Olympic profile, etc. So we did find, for instance, at Newington College, one of the sort of difficulties is to make sure the talented athletes do rowing, and of course there's some other more attractive sports such as basketball and water polo, which don't take up as much time necessarily. But so the tall, long-limbed players may choose those sports instead of rowing, and so we had a little bit of difficulty sort of roping in the best talent in the school, but I don't think that's wasn't a major limiting factor. Perhaps there's other things involved there. So yeah.
Sure, yeah. And so now in this school, and you mentioned to me when we had a chat beforehand that you found it quite a challenge in the first year to adapt to this new environment, or was it to the girls' part of that, or just this environment that is so multi-sport? Or
I think it was a bit of everything. I think I'd coached only males prior to the 5 years ago, till 5 years ago. So when I started at Pymble, it probably helped that I've got 4 older sisters, so I've got some understanding of how girls operate, and I've also got 3 daughters. So I suppose in that sense, it was a bit easier than it might have been otherwise. But I certainly needed to just get a sense of the context that I work in. I suppose that's the same in any club or any environment you go into as a coach. The context is extremely important. So one of the things I tried to do was probably just didn't spend enough time assessing the lay of the land at the time before I, imprinted what ideas I wanted to put through. So if I had my time again, I probably would have in that first season just sat back a little bit more and observed a bit more than what I did, and probably waited till I'd assessed the context and then adapted what I did. So eventually I did do that. So it probably took me 18 months in the job to get to that point. And once I did, it was quite easy from there to be able to, really get a strong program going. And I guess we've been able to do that since, and it's been highly enjoyable and very rewarding because of that. But it did take that little bit of open thinking and understanding things, particularly from the girls' point of view, was probably the big message in all that.
Okay, yeah. And you've, with that many sports, I'm guessing the shift, because any coach, if you like, an ambitious coach comes charging into this, thinks, right, I really want to get this program going. But the girls have got so many different things going on. They've got their academic requirements as well. They're not like full-time elite athletes. So it takes a bit of like you say, you've got to sit back a little bit. And I think every coach has probably been in that position at the outset of their career. We want to go fast and we want to go hard, but it doesn't necessarily work quite like that, does it?
No, that's right. And I think you have to probably learn that the hard way, unfortunately. As much as you can get people like us telling you how to do that, I think sometimes you just have to do that the difficult way. But that said, I think if you're aware of it, it probably does help in terms of just holding back a little bit. On that note, with the girls, we do have, this is quite a strong academic school as well. So, in many ways, we have a lot of, the girls have a lot of things on their plate. And, that might be not just sports, it could be other things, so there's music, there's dance, there's all sorts of other co-curricular activities, and there's academics, and the girls are very serious about their academic work, and I respect that, and I really admire that from them, and therefore we have to adjust what we do to make sure that it's palatable for the girls purely from a time point of view, but also just understanding what they enjoy and adapting our program in that way. And also one of the big challenges we've got is we're located in the North Shore of Sydney, which is a nice affluent area, but we have a long distance to travel to our boat shed, which is in Leichhardt. So anyone who's familiar with the landscape in Sydney will know that that's a good 45-minute drive one way from the school to the boat shed. And so we're a bit limited by the number of sessions we can do on the water. And so that's sort of probably the most significant limiting factor to the success of the program. So we have to be very flexible in the ways that we adapt ourselves to get the girls to, continue to be enthused about traveling 45 minutes on a bus. So it just,
What does a typical week look like in that type of scenario then, where you have this significant amount of travel?
Sure. So we have 2 morning rowing sessions. So I just work with the seniors here, so that this is the top end of our program. So so they have 2 morning sessions before school, and they're on the water sessions, and they do 1 afternoon session. And where we row is on Iron Cove, and that's got excellent water in the morning, but usually, like probably at least 50% of the time in the afternoon, particularly in summer, the wind is very strong. And so we get used to rowing in not very good conditions, and the old saying, rowing in the rough makes you tough, gets bandied around a lot. So it's a bit of a limiting factor from our point of view, in the sense we'd like to do 3 or 4 morning sessions, but literally our bus leaves the school. We've got a bus that leaves the school at 4:45 a.m. And then the girls travel to the boat shed, train for, we only get about 80 to 90 minutes at the boat shed from when the bus arrives to when it leaves. So we really have a very limited time to get value out of those sessions. And so we've had to become very good at getting on the water quickly and getting stuck into the workloads and doing things as well as we can in terms of that side of things. So two morning sessions a week. We do 2 strength sessions, and they can vary depending on what time of season we're in. And so sometimes they're purely sort of a strength session, and other times they're a strength endurance circuit style weights. And then we also do just an aerobic session where we're, sort of T2 or U2, whatever you want to call that these days. And that's just done in the girls' own time when they can fit it in during the week. One thing, so that's during the week. And then on a Saturday, that's normally our sort of big training day. We just try and get 2 sessions in that are pretty long sessions. So, and then if it's regatta season, we usually have the races on the Saturday. Sometimes we train on a Sunday, but we're trying to minimise all that. One thing I probably have adjusted is just trying to give the girls more days away from rowing in a week as possible. So we actually give them Fridays off completely from rowing, and so we don't see them and don't talk to them about rowing on a Friday, and also a Sunday as much as possible. So most of the Sundays in the season, if you're in the first 8, you probably don't have very much on in terms of rowing, unless there's a regatta. So that gives the girls time to recover and to just give them the space they need away from rowing in the week. And I find, we build up the volume through the week. So by Thursday's probably our hardest training day, or it is definitely. We do a tough session in the morning on the water, and then they back it up in the afternoon in the gym with a circuit it's a pretty tough endurance circuit usually. And then on Fridays they're off, and then Saturday morning they arrive at the boat shed ready to go again, which is quite good. And one other thing for teenagers is that they recover much quicker than elite or older athletes, generally speaking. So whilst you think they're pretty exhausted from, say, on a Thursday afternoon, I'll look at the kids and go, oh wow, we've really cooked them there, and then they'll turn up on Saturday very well recovered, and I feel that's something that's specific to that age group. It's probably not so much so the older you get.
Yeah. I guess those older athletes are operating closer to their edge as well, aren't they? The capacity of the young athlete is quite different. One thing you mentioned to me was philosophy in sport and in rowing within the school to not leave anyone behind in that sense. Yeah.
So one of the things so the school's philosophy is to provide an individualised education. So that means every single student is of, the idea is to have every single student is of equal value in many ways. And so therefore we need to be able to adapt our coaching and the way our program operates to basically allow anyone in the school who wants to do rowing to do it, which is fine. And, that's a good situation. So that means we have, quite a wide range of natural ability coming into the program. But I think some of the most rewarding coaching experience I've had at the school have been when I've been working with what we call our, bottom end crews in terms of our, maybe our 5th and 6th quad sculls in an age group who perhaps in other sports they haven't really found their feet in any other sports, and they may not be great at ball sports or whatever it may be, and suddenly they discover, oh, actually I can do this sport, and they make great technical milestones, and they get fitter and they get healthier, and they're part of a team, and they really enjoy being part of a bigger squad that links them to some of the sort of more elite level athletes at the school. And so we've tried to play that, that's a deliberate strategy of what we do is, and I guess the other thing linked to that is the point score trophies at our regattas. So most of our regattas have a trophy for the overall point score. So basically all of the results during the day get added up to whichever the most successful school is overall. And invariably we tend to have the biggest program by a little bit, but we have to work pretty hard to win that overall point score, and it's a great credit to our opposition. We really have a tough time getting those point scores. It kind of sometimes looks a bit easy from the outside, but to be honest, it's a real stress for us. But because each of the results in the whole day matters equally. So it means that if you're in the first 8, you can only get 10 points as a rower, and that's a win. Second place is 8 points, third place is 7, and it just works down from there. So if you're in the 6th year 8 quad, which is probably our bottom crew in terms of age and ability, your value is equal. If you're a rower in that, you can win 10 points in the school by winning your race, and therefore that affects the way we set up our program and we schedule our program, and we allocate coaching and we allocate resources and boats and everything else. So to do that well, we have to not just say we do that, we have to live that. It's really easy to say we look after everybody and then live a different reality. And so I feel like I've got very good at doing that. And sometimes some of our coaches feel probably I do that a little bit too much, but I know that the value of doing it, it builds a lot of trust with the overall cohort of the girls. And also I feel like it's, I feel like it's just important to have people of all abilities, enjoying our sport, not just the top level.
Yeah. It's teaching people to love a sport, really, isn't it? It's not simply about performance. And how does the school then judge success? You can answer that in rowing terms or in sports terms. Obviously, it's a school that's highly invested in sport, so it must have some sense of what do we want to get from this?
Yeah, I think in the immediate term, whilst there's a lot of investment in it, I think the investment's done mainly to align with the college's strategic plan, which is basically to make sure that the students have a lot of options to find their activity or their sport that they love. So that's kind of one of the the pillars of the school, is offering such a wide range of opportunities for the girls, so that should you enrol at the school, that no matter what your background is or no matter what you're into, you'll be able to find your niche at the school and be able to be developed really well in that. And so therefore, from the school's end of things, they're probably looking to make sure that each of our programs offers that. So that should someone who just loves their rowing, they can find themselves in that rowing program and enjoy themselves regardless of their abilities. And so therefore the measure of success is often positive feedback from girls, positive feedback from parents. Now, invariably, if you do your job pretty well in that area, then lots of success usually comes your way on the racetrack. So, building that that model first, it's kind of a ground up model, really, rather than looking towards the top end of things. So we've got to be very flexible in the way we deliver the program, and so that might mean one morning I'm out with the first 8, delivering a high level session, and then the next session I do is with the year 8 5th quad, and someone who's learning how to row for the first time, and and that requires that flexibility, but they're equally as rewarding from a coaching point of view, is the way I see it. The school does enjoy winning trophies, etc. I don't think any school hates that. So there is some, it's never really spoken to us to say, look, get out there and win it. But there's kind of a fair bit of competition, because we within other sports, so our swimming team at the moment is going very well. Our athletics team does very well. Our netball, etc., etc. Lots of our sports do very well at the top level, and so you kind of want to get on that same bandwagon. So in many ways, whilst you want to provide a great program overall, you also want some of the trophies and the victories that come with that. And as I said, if you do the job well with that, the things I said first, then the success tends to follow with that.
Okay. And when the girls are selecting sports, does the success of the sport or its perception within the school play a role in their selection?
Yeah, a little bit. Less so than at the boys' schools. So the previous history and maybe knowing what's happened in the past in that particular sport does play a little role in the girls' schools. But I feel like in perhaps the boys' schools, where they may have usually got a slightly longer history than that, and it's played maybe a bit more significant part of the education process, has that the history plays a big role in the selection of the sport. And I feel like maybe the girls have got it a little bit healthier in terms of their mentality. They're selecting the sport because they want to do it, rather than because their grandfather rode in the first 8, So it's I feel like it's quite a healthy environment where the girls pick, they pick it because that's the sport they want to do, and there's little other influences on that. But that said, it does help to have, if you're running it, more important for the girls is what the other girls get out of the program. And so, as you said, the perception of the sport in the school itself is very important. And as you're probably aware, most rowing programs in schools are not very popular relative to the other sports. So, the rowers always get a little bit of stick from the other students just because they tend to talk a lot about their rowing experiences, and it's probably pretty boring for non-rowing fraternity. So anyway, I've found that, obviously rowers are not very popular in most schools, but they tend to be the better athletes in often.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I was saying is, so with the girls, they if they have a positive experience where they have fun and they enjoy their time in their sport, then they're far more likely to pick that sport than whether or not the sport's got a success track record of success.
Okay.
But if you get both of them together, so if the kids enjoy themselves and they go and talk that they're really loving that out in the playground, that they're loving their rowing, then you're more likely to get people come and join the program for that reason.
Yeah.
That's very important to us.
Okay. So in the current circumstances, what are the girls actually doing now? Because school isn't available to them.
Yeah. So we were unfortunate to be when COVID-19 struck and where restrictions were put in place by our government. We were about 3 weeks from our major regattas. We actually had our the Australian National Championships is coming up in I think it was 3 weeks from when we had to cut the program, and then the week following the Nationals was when our New South Wales Schoolgirls Head of the River is, and that's probably our biggest regatta for the whole squad. So both those regattas are what we work for, all the way through. So we were on the tail end of 6 months worth of work, and we had to break the news to the girls that they weren't able to complete their season.
Yeah, I'm just going to run a little bit of video that you took recently.
So this is on the Sydney International Regatta Centre. I don't even know when this was, probably about January or February maybe. Okay.
So the girls have this sense they're building up for this thing, and then COVID-19 starts to come onto the horizon. How are they dealing with that, or at the point where you actually have to stop, where you go, right, there is no championship?
Yeah, the point we had to stop was a tough decision we had to make. I got word on the Friday night that the Nationals was going to be cancelled, and that was prior to that being released to the public. So what I did is we had most of our squad was training on the Saturday morning, that next morning, and so we knew in advance that the Nationals was going to be off, which meant that if our Head of the River was a week afterwards, we definitely weren't going to be running the Head of the River. So we sort of knew that, with certainty, and that allowed us to not just break the news, but also to provide the necessary support on that day. So we had our coaching team and most of our students there, except for one of the squads. One of the younger squads wasn't there that day, but every other, 80% of our rowers were there. And so that meant that we were able to firstly break the news, which was, shocking to the girls in many ways. But I think, the writing was on the wall in the news. You could see that things were changing quickly and it wasn't looking good. So it wasn't altogether a massive shock for them, but it was certainly devastating for them to hear that, the finality of it all. But what we did is we just got each of the coaches to go with their individual crews, and we ran through a set of 5 questions with them, and just to try and take away from the fact that they'd lost the opportunity to race at their final race, and start to look at the areas that they had improved through the season. So we got to talk about the top 3 or 4 funny moments of the season. We looked at individually, how much have you grown as a person? And so we got the girls to talk through that. How have you grown as a rower? What have you improved as a rower? What challenges have you overcome and succeeded with as a crew? And so that sort of, that exercise took about 20 minutes to 30 minutes for each crew, and it gave the opportunity for the girls to express the things they'd enjoyed out of the season, and to really focus less on the race results and the race opportunities that they'd missed, and focus more on, what have they got out of the season from a purely human point of view. and I feel, by the end of that exercise, we had girls smiling, we had them laughing, where there was quite a few tears at the beginning of the morning. By the end, there was a sense of, okay, we're in this together. It's not the biggest devastation in the world, but it is obviously something that's quite tough to deal with and challenging. But we didn't want to just sort of say, oh, well, that's our season done and that's the end of it all. And so that allowed the girls, I think, to really digest some of the information a lot easier than what we would have if they'd found out without having that opportunity. So
interesting. Yeah, I did one of these sessions with Chris Shambrook, who's a sports psychologist who's worked with the British Olympic team and British rowing team. And pretty much a very similar strategy is the recommendation at the moment is, yes, this is a moment in time, but you have to look at where you've come from and the things that you've done and all the things that underpin it. And I really like the idea of finding the fun in that as well. So yeah, that's a nice approach and something that seems to be the general path that people are taking to deal with this. Now, are there any girls in this who, well, presumably there are some girls who this will be their last year?
Yeah, so usually in any of the first and second eights and top crews we've got, so a senior squad, there's usually about half of the numbers of that are year 12. So, in a good year, we've got up to 23 or 4 girls who are in year 12 leaving, which is quite extraordinary. This year, we're a little bit lighter on numbers, but there's a significant number of them leaving, which is tough for them. That's toughest for them because that's what they look forward to. And a lot of them, from the age of, that's my first year group that I sort of was associated with from year 7 when they started in the senior school. So for them, I've sort of been on the journey with them from when they first picked up an oar through to now. So I know them, very well as people, and I know them well as rowers. And it's, it's tough to see them not get their final hurrah. But at the same token, I sort of pride myself on being able to, be more, less transactional and more transformational in my coaching, using some coaching parlance there. But basically, my philosophy is not to necessarily go for race results first, but more like, transform the person and then let's see how we go with the race results. And so taking that approach has really helped in this situation, because it means that the strong relationships that I've built with the athletes over time, they're still there and they will endure for time going on. And I feel, the girls, I'm sure, enjoy that aspect of the rowing side of things as well. And that's something that COVID-19 can't take away.
Yeah. So that point you make about a transformational approach rather than a transactional approach, how conscious have you been of your evolution or your development? Because not many coaches necessarily start in that place.
Sure. I was fairly fortunate. I mean, probably as a young person, I was like a bull at a gate, just trying to get some race results and to enjoy winning and trying to get selected in teams, etc. And obviously that's a good way to do things. It does work in many ways if you're strong enough at doing what you're doing. But I feel like to get enduring success and to enjoy your to get satisfaction out of your role as a coach, you need to find that that human connection and to look for things other than those race results. Whilst and probably I learned that quite early, because even in those couple of Australian teams I was in early in my career, that we came second in both those races at the under 23s, and one was by 0.02 of a second and the other one was by 0.01 of a second 2 years later. So there's a mile of difference between being the best in the world and not being the best in the world. And so, but at the same token, if you just focused on the result, you'd be disappointed. But if you focus on what transformation did we have as a crew, how did those athletes develop, what was the experience like, why did we do it, did we achieve what we wanted to achieve from a purely broad perspective, and the answer is yes to all those questions. And so I feel I learnt that lesson quite early in my career, even though I was probably quite transactional in my approach. And then it's probably just taken a few years to get to a point to have the courage to be able to focus on that. That's the other thing. It does take a bit of courage to say, what, actually, I'm going to focus on this first and then we'll focus on the results, because most programs are judged by results. And that's a reality, particularly at at an Olympic level and a higher level, elite level, because results determine funding and all that sort of thing. But, within a school context, there is still quite a lot of pressure to win races. And so I feel it does take a high level of courage, or quite a little bit of courage, and having enough experience to be able to know that that's the right way to go and I'm going to take it. And I'll do that first. And then we'll, it doesn't mean we ignore results. It just means that we take that as a secondary part of what we do.
Yeah, the results will follow if you actually...
Yeah. You need to build that trust. That process will, by taking the transactional approach, the results will follow. I've also found that, if you don't get the results, so, again, just an example, last year's first 8, we finished second in the Head of the River, which is our big regatta, by, I think it was 0.2 of a second, 0.26 of a second or something, so a foot maybe between first and second place. And, that crew was wonderful crew, and they ended up coming second at the Nationals as well. And it was it was a great experience. And, so are they any different to the crew that won before, the year before, and I think, well, probably not. Yes, the year before got a little bit more accolades where they won it, but really from the point of view, from the kids' point of view, and from my experience as the coach and being part of their experience, I feel pretty good about saying, you know what, we actually had a really good experience here, and we learned a lot out of it, and as people you've developed and all that sort of thing. And yes, we didn't get the trophy, but we feel we've probably got something out of that. It was well worth our time doing it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Certainly, I've become more involved with junior rowing over the past couple of years. I stop and reflect at times and realize that sometimes I actually get more satisfaction out of seeing the person change and evolve and how they approach things. And the physical side is quite funny in a way, because if you want a better erg score with a junior, we joke in the club, all you have to do is wait. Yeah. Because they're going to grow and get stronger. Whereas when you deal with a senior athlete, it's like trying to squeeze blood out of a stone to get an improvement in an erg, because they're right at the edge already. So the way things can be framed in that environment makes for a lot of fun.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I've stayed in that environment, in many ways. I think I probably had the opportunity at some stage of my career to go into more elite level coaching. I just haven't been able to do it. From a family point of view, I've got 4 kids, so it's difficult to perhaps go down that avenue when you've got so many kids and responsibilities to deal with at home. And so that's probably the thing that's maybe stopped me going down that elite path so much in my younger year group, not my younger year ages, but it's probably been a really blessing in disguise, because I think I've really enjoyed being around the kids, no matter what age I've been. They provide energy, they're enthusiastic, they're fun to be around, and just being able to play a role in their development as a person and as a rower is I feel really important, but B, very rewarding from a personal point of view.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, and you've undersold it to me in a big way, Simon, is your master's thesis. So when like you say, you spent so much time on it that you almost take it for granted. When you sent me the little summary that you have, and I'm going to share that with people here, that hopefully they can see some of this. I'll zoom in a little bit on some of it if I can.
Sure.
That, when I look through this and some of the things that you've actually put down. So just before we start, just tell us a little bit about your master's and your approach to it and why you wanted to do one.
Yeah, sure. So I took up a Master's of Educational Leadership, or it's called a Master of Education, majoring in educational leadership. And, that was just to develop my leadership skills and to probably keep my brain operating a bit more. It's my 4th university degree, so I'm not really... I don't know. It's probably my 15th or 16th year at university, which means I'm either stupid or crazy or something. But I just sort of needed something to take my brain to the next level, and so this provided that. And when you do, I chose to do a research part of that. You can choose to do coursework or research. And when I chose the research, because I was working in rowing coaching at the time, and the people always advise you to do research on what you're interested in and what you're doing at the time. So I decided to do that research project into rowing coaching. One of the things I was pretty interested in is how coaches, rowing coaches, and particularly high school coaches, how they embed mental skills training or psychological skills training into their coaching practice. And so that was basically the theme of the research study. I was fortunate to be able to run that through Rowing Australia's coaching program. So the NCAS is our coaching degrees. That's our coaching qualification system. And Ron Batt, who's the head of that, was very generous with his time and effort to distribute the research survey amongst all of our registered coaches, of which there's 2,000 or 3,000, and so 93 coaches who the prerequisite was that you had to be a school coach, and you could be a level 1, 2 or 3 coach. And so got a wide range of different coaches from all around Australia who answered that survey, which was great. And then the second part of the research was interviewing. I interviewed 10 subjects or 10 people about their coaching practices and their mental skills stuff. And I was fortunate again to have some of the best coaching directors or directors of rowing from the major schools in Australia, who offered their time and their expertise to those interviews. And those interviews typically ran for an hour to an hour and a half, so quite in-depth discussions. And what that led to was the development of these themes that you can see on the screen right now. And so the main themes that came out of it are listed to the left. And they're kind of in order of importance there. So the top one there is enjoyment or fun. And I guess, what I've put here, this publication you're showing is a research journal that our school produces, which basically taps into the staff who are currently working at the school. Anyone who's doing any research or study can put an article together for this. And so they asked me to do that on my master's thesis. And so this is basically a summary of how those themes that I took from the master's thesis translate into how we operate our rowing program. And I think you'll probably find, if you look at the strategies that we use there, you won't see this in coaching manuals. That's the thing that you probably notice. It's some of these things are very simple, but they are very important. And so if we miss some of those or a small amount of those, we probably won't get the end result we've had. So we've been flexible. It takes an open mind. It takes a lot of understanding the context. It takes allowing the girls to take a lead in what they want to do. So the teachers would call that student voice. Understanding what the students want and incorporating that into our program. And so basically this is a summary of how those themes look like in our Pymble program. And you can just see some of those things. Fun's a big aspect of it. We do a thing that I think's worked really well over the last couple of seasons, which is we're fortunate to be able to have GPS speed coaches for most of our crews. We've got about 15 of them in the program, which means a lot of our, at any one time on a training session, most of our crews get to use a speed coach. But that allows us then to do an exercise, which we try and do once a week at least, is get the crew to just do 10 or 15 strokes at full speed. And just record the split they get it down to. And then we've got a whiteboard in our boat shed that basically has a list of the crews, and then the girls write up their fastest split for the day or for the week. And so it becomes a very good internal competition. And so you might get, say, the Year 9 third quad does, 1:45, and then the Year 8 third quad says, all right, well, let's go and beat that. And then they go 1:44, and then the Year 9s see that and they go, well, if the Year 8s are doing that, we should go 1:42 or whatever. And then it just builds over time. And so it's kind of an ongoing dialogue going between the crews, and healthy competition, but certainly lighthearted. And it means basically, the pressure becomes quite strong for, if you happen to be, say, the 4th quad in a group and the 5th quad's beating you, well, you better pull your socks up, So it's that's just one way of firstly making it fun, and secondly focusing on an outcome that we want, which is boat speed.
Yeah.
So that's one of them. The other one is just making sure, I think I already mentioned this, the team unity thing, basically valuing each person and making sure they understand that they have a role in the team's point score. And therefore we really value each person. So that's quite clear in that. One of the other things that I think came through in all of these interviews that I did with these people was that the common focus on care. Actually, our school values, so the school as an organisation has, one of their values is care, and many schools have that as one of their values, but care is one thing I've really focused on for our girls, but also from a coaching point of view, I do talk to our coaches a lot about how can you show care, how do you show that you care, and I think, I look at it from a girl's point of view. Teenage girls want to know their coach cares about them and about their performance, and cares about things that actually matter. And I think that's probably the same across all coaching, to be honest, when I look at it. And so one of our real big goals as a coaching team is to show that we care. Every day we meet with them, and that starts with little things like, for instance, when the bus arrives at the boat shed, either me or somebody else is out the front of the boat shed, opening the front door and saying, "G'day, how are you? How was your day? How was school?" And then that gives you it's a 5-second interaction with each of the girls. Firstly, that gets them to get to know you better. Secondly, there's usually a bit of banter going on, so ongoing conversations that happen throughout the season, and might be some funny little comments made or whatever. Thirdly, it allows you to give to set the tone, and that's usually a positive, happy, enthusiastic tone. So most girls get off the bus pretty tired and not looking exactly enthused to be there. So you can make a little comment or have a go at them for being a little bit slow or what it may be, and generally that just picks them up straight away. And then the fourth thing I do when I do that is I take a good look in their eyes and check out how they're feeling. And you can usually see if someone's down and they've got something that's more pressing than just being tired. And so that allows you then to have be aware of that, and then also have a conversation with that girl before they get on the water. So just little things like that are the care things that matter. And again, you wouldn't do that normally. It's taken me a long time to get to know that process we do is important. Just a little thing, but it does make a big difference, I think, over time. I'll just work through quickly here. Some of the other ones, we do some goal setting. We've got a bit of a system where we've got a big A3 page that contains, it's that bringing our crew together thing. So that includes a SWOT analysis, some performance goals, and the standards that are required to fulfill those goals, and then some information from the rowers about how the coxswain can do a better job. And that we do that with all of our crews, no matter what level, and that allows the coach to imprint a little bit more of the mental side of the coaching onto their crew, and also it opens up the conversation. If there's any issues there, they can be worked through. So we usually do that process once in term 4, which is our sort of the first pre-season of part of our pre-season, and then again during our rowing camp in January, which is at the end of the January holidays, we usually sit down with each of the crews and work through those that process, which tends to get the goal setting side of things done really well. I think other things we do there, you can see down the page there, self-confidence, at any level of coaching, that's vital. Some people would call it self-efficacy, being able to understand that you're good at what you're doing. And so we try and do a thing called the VIA Character Strength Survey, which is it's a free survey you can use. Basically, you do a survey, it takes 15 to 20 minutes to do the survey, and then it spits out your top 5 character strengths. And then I ask the girls to apply that to their rowing, and how will they use those strengths, individual strengths they've got, to apply to their crew. And they write that down, and it makes them really think about what value do I add to this crew. I talk a lot about positive impact on the crew around you, on the people around you, which is stolen from some of the American coaches, but it's a good concept. And I often ask them to do one thing that has a positive impact on the people around you whenever you're at the boat shed. And you build that over 120 odd rowers, and amongst 20 coaches, that's 140 positive things that people are doing on a daily basis. We're going to build some pretty good stuff there if we keep going with that. So that's the sort of chat that gets that going with the self-confidence. And the other one is just to really set the girls up with challenges. One of the things that teenagers have is irrational thinking. It's probably not just teenagers, it's everybody. But when you're under a bit of pressure, you often, over state in your mind what the opposition might be like, or, all sorts of things. And so just having conversations with the girls and getting to know them and knowing, question them a bit and challenge their negative thinking a little bit around those things, and just get them to understand the value they have, and that, actually that value is quite a lot. And when it comes to race time, when it comes to the third quarter of the race and you've got that strength of character and you've got that value, that's the time to be selfish and to put your crew in the lead there, and just that sort of talk does get the girls to feel good about themselves. And I think it works in terms of developing toughness. What else have we got? Mental preparation for racing. So a lot of that stuff we do is pretty standard across most programs, but we do make sure we do it, which is lots of side-by-side training with other crews, and then also just talking through stuff on the water. One of the primary strategies from my thesis was that most of the coaches found that on-water coaching is where they embed a lot of their mental skills training. And so from a school point of view, we always just talk to them about, visualize what it might be like at Cirque. Cirque's our major race course there. So visualize. So whenever we do a practice start, I always get the girls say, what's it going to be like at Cirque, right now? Visualize, take yourself to there. You're in lane 3. You've got 3 other crews around you. What are you thinking? That sort of talk, what are the nerves going to be like at that point? How will you deal with it? That sort of questioning, and just getting them to think about those things in advance of that happening. And I feel, we've done a pretty good job with that, where I feel the girls are pretty well prepared for racing. The other thing we do is be pretty structured about their pre-race routine. So we have a document that each crew produces for a race prior to a race, which is basically from 90 minutes before the race, what are you supposed to be doing? Gives the girls some structure. Some of that's like do a race warm-up do a land warm-up, do some stretching, and go to the bathroom, take the oars to the pontoon, have a crew chat, check the boat out, blah, blah, blah. All those things that we all do, but it puts it into a systematic way. And the girls, we use that from the first regatta right through to the last, and it doesn't change very much from there. So they get used to practicing that race routine, so that when it comes to, the nationals or whatever, the girls are really relaxed and really confident in their plan. And I guess that applies at school level, but I think it also applies at an elite level too.
It applies at every level. But Simon, this is a gem of a document. I've got to say to you that in a way, it's if every program was ticking the boxes in each of these competencies, they'd be in pretty good shape, mate. It's simple, but like you say, on the right-hand side, you're actually offering strategies and what you're actually trying to accomplish. And I really, really like that. It's incredibly powerful. So, you should be banging the drum with this one.
As I said to you at the start, I think perhaps that I'm a little bit tainted by the process of writing up the thesis. It's 24,000 words, so it's just took up a fair bit of my time and effort, and so I was pretty sick of it by the end of it all. But I'm well over it now. It was a long time ago now, sort of 18 months ago. But thank you for pointing that out. I should be hitting that drum a little bit more.
I love it. I think there's so much good stuff in here, and I've had some discussions with coaches about coach education, and you get all the usual stuff about training and technique and so on, but actually what you've got here is the heart and soul of a group and a team and a club. And how you actually go about that. And it's not just the competences, if you like, on the left. It's some real strategies about how to do something about that. And I could imagine a group being quite excited using that to even come up with more ideas and other things that they can do, and really get the athletes to own the situation, which is ultimately what we have to do. As coaches, we're faced with that situation. We don't do the racing. We're not even close to the racing when it happens. And I've always felt that the athletes feeling in control of what they're doing and accountable, that's the best situation they can be in.
Yeah. And that's what we aim for.
Yeah.
You mentioned technique. One of the things that's probably not in that strategy thing is, you know, because we have limited training time due to the distance from the boat shed, one of the things we had to do is really simplify our technique to get some uniformity across the boat shed from, you know, year 7 to year 12. That's a reasonable challenge. It's probably made it a little bit easier nowadays in that there's so many good online resources for kids to look at. And perhaps too many online resources, actually. It becomes very confusing about what to listen to. But you know, there's a much better understanding of what makes a boat move, and there's probably, you know, a fairly uniform level of different types of techniques that are going around in the world now than perhaps what there was 30 years ago. So I feel like, you know, the girls have a good understanding of what it looks like to row well. And one of the ways we do that is we've got a technical philosophy is what it's called, and it's just 5 points that we teach the girls, and we make sure that we structure our training program around those 5 points. So that philosophy goes like this. It's called row the longest stroke in the strongest position, row the most accelerated stroke, let the boat run on the recovery, and do it all together. And so those 5 points are what basically underpin our the technical exercises we give the girls, and also the technical focuses we take into our training week by week. So we usually just start the season. First one's row the longest stroke. So we set the girls up. Length is an important part of rowing. And the second caveat to that is in the strongest position. So then we talk posture and not overstretching, but some of them do overstretch, as you can see in the video. And then we talk a lot about acceleration, how to accelerate the handle. And then we talk about letting the boat run in between strokes and getting an effective rhythm, and then the timing aspects, the final bit. And so we just run through that, and it means the girls tend to have a good understanding of those 5 core principles. And as probably most of all of us know, those 5 principles, they're not rocket science. Everyone's sort of focusing on those sorts of things. But I feel like, you know, in the end, I'm quite proud to look at our crews at a regatta and know that, you know, they're probably rowing pretty similar styles, and that, you know, they do know those 5 things. So should they go on to rowing elsewhere in their careers, they, you know, certainly have a good foundation for what's coming ahead of them. And so we imprint that quite heavily into our program.
And you spoke about how you use video with the girls as well when we had our chat before this session.
Yeah. So our, you know, traditionally our you know, coaches, we do a lot of this is just the individual video analysis where we pick apart a rower in front of their crewmates and tear strips off them for having their blade late at the catch, and, you know, highlight all their flaws. And so that was, you know, perhaps what I did for the early part of my career. And then I suddenly started to realise, you know, really, is that the best way? Is, you know, naming and shaming rowers in front of their peers the best way to develop, you know, their skills and their belief in themselves? And questioning that led me to sort of say, actually, most people are more sensitive than they let on. So even though it might be a lighthearted dig at them, they do take it to heart pretty hard, and it probably doesn't improve their ability. They, you know, really. Yes, they get to see their rowing, you know, and what that looks like, and definitely they understand what they need to achieve. But I needed to come up with a way that was going to work for the girls to be able to see how they rowed, and then allow them to take some ownership in what they were doing in terms of making their improvements. And so one of the ways, it just kind of happened by accident. I had my iPhone with me. The girls were rowing really nicely, and I just took some footage of it and just some continual footage. And then I just asked the girls, I'm going to put some music to this video and you can have a look at it. And they said, oh, can you put this song on? And, you know, so I went and put that song on, gave them the video, just save it on Vimeo, and then just sent them the link. And anyway, we were on a training camp at the time, and, you know, that was at night time. I gave them the video, and, you know, the next morning we went out on the water, and I suddenly noticed a significant improvement in about, you know, each individual had fixed the thing that we'd been batting on about for the last 3 days. And, you know, any timing differences were erased, you know, blade heights were good. All these little things that I'd been sort of hampering on it for the whole time suddenly were fixed. And I said to the girls after that, oh, what's going on here? You guys have all made these improvements. They said, oh yeah, we saw it on the video. And we watched the video. I said, what's the difference between that and you know, normal video? And they said, oh, well, we just liked watching the video because it was a nice video and the music was good. And then, you know, I said, oh, did you slow it down at any point? So they said, yeah, of course we did. But we did it in our own time and, you know, had a look at it. And so what it did is basically got the girls, enthused about their rowing, so they could see that it was actually aesthetically a nice looking thing to do. And secondly, it got them to, you know, have a good look at themselves in the context of their crew and how are they rowing relative to their peers. But thirdly, it just allowed them to watch some rowing, and, you know, that's encouraging girls who might have other things in their lives to watch rowing is probably not a real easy thing to do. So because it's them, they definitely want to watch it. And so we just put these videos together. And, you know, to be honest, I haven't actually sat down with a crew individually since about probably 2018 to just go through the video. But it seems to work pretty nicely in terms of just fixing things. So
I'm fascinated by that. And I suppose I've done a little bit of something similar where, yeah, you know, years ago you had to get everyone in the room and you queued the whole thing up and you plugged it in the back of the TV and half the room fell asleep while you pointed out something. And eventually you're asking yourself, I'm not sure how much value there is in this. So obviously with things online, it's easier for people to consume it when they want and how they want. And I'm fascinated that the music piece made such a difference. There's got to be a master's for someone in there, Simon.
Oh, probably, but not me. No, it's also, I think it's important, you know, what I did focus on is, you know, often we used to get footage of them rowing badly, you know, and whereas, and show them, okay, this is you rowing badly, so, you know, here's the errors that you're making. And so one of the key components is we get the best part of the session, you know, where they're rowing well, and so they see themselves rowing well, and you can go, okay, all right, that's what it looks like when we row well. And, you know, so these are probably the bits that are where they're probably rowing pretty well relative to what they were at times. And you can see it's not perfect, it's far from it, but it's you know, it's nice. Yeah. It looks good and it's nice to watch. So.
Yeah, and in the end, I'll never apologize for, I actually like rowing to be beautiful.
Yeah, that's one of I focus a lot on too.
I don't really have a great deal of interest in ugly rowing.
Yeah.
I know sometimes people will say, well, if it wins, that's fantastic, but okay. I'm from the Johan Cruyff school of rowing, you know, yeah. more about total rowing than a brutal type. And that's something I've always admired actually about just the way the Australians go about their business in that sense. There seems to be a priority to the way that you move a boat.
Yeah, there always has been. I think a lot of that influence has come from Rusty Robertson, who was actually a New Zealand coach before he came to Australia, but he was coaching the lightweight fours in the late mid-70s and early 80s for Australia. And a lot of those coaches that were then influential in this generation of coaches, you know, took that through. So Tim McLaren's an example of that. Andrew Randell's an example of that. You know, these are people who've learnt from Rusty Robertson, and then they've passed that on to perhaps my generation. And so a lot of those sort of key messages of rowing well, and maybe it's in the Aussie character as well, of just being a bit of an underdog and saying, you know what, let's give it to these people who might be physically bigger and stronger. You know, we'd like to outclass you with our rowing rather than out muscling you. So there's a bit of that in the culture of our nation. And I suppose, you know, I've been fortunate to coach lightweights early in my career. And you don't have a choice when you're coaching lightweights but to have a look at rowing well. You know, you can't row ugly and win there unless you're very physically strong, and you know, that's difficult to achieve. Yeah. So I was very fortunate to get some really good grounding early in my career on rowing well, and I've taken that through. I'm probably less perfectionistic than I was a while ago, but I feel, you know, I'm pretty proud of the way our crews row. They're, you know, as I say, they're not perfect technically. You'll see the average, you know, someone's blade height will be a bit out, our catches are not always accurate, but I feel like our girls, I always talk to them about, show me your confidence when you row. So what does confidence look like when you row? You know, what does certainty look like when you row? And you know, they tell me, you know, oh, good crisp blade work and, you know, nice time on the slide and relaxation and all the things that, you know, make up good rowing. But so that's, you know, just a way of doing that.
Yeah, you've alluded to it a little bit there, just in the last couple of minutes, these other coaches, and the impact that some of these coaches have had on you over the years, and obviously very fortunate when you were quite young, for example, on that under 23 experience. If you were to offer advice to a young coach as to how to move forward and to move forward in an open-minded way, what would you actually be saying to them?
I'd say be a learner. Be open to taking as much advice as you can. Be enthusiastic about that, to become a master of your craft, but never think that you're the master of the craft even when you get there, sort of thing. So that's the old saying of just be a lifelong learner. I think that's really important. And secondly, to be yourself. So you have to, whilst you can take everyone's ideas and you could steal ideas and print them in the way you coach, that's not going to work. You have to be authentic. So authenticity comes from being yourself, knowing yourself, and then knowing how to actually use your strengths to impart your wisdom on others and to help others to be better. And so that's I think probably the most advice I can offer to a young coach is just get out there, learn things as much as you can, lap it up, be open-minded, and don't be afraid to be yourself in the way you coach things, because that's the best way that the athletes will listen to you and take your advice and get what they need out of your skills.
Super. Thank you very much. Well, we've flown through an hour here, Simon, and you were concerned, that time would actually, you might have difficulty with time, but it's been fascinating because you've covered your development. I'm really interested in and fascinated by the way that you've grown the program, and now in some respects I have a better understanding simply because some of what you've shown me, and certainly that document, that if that's a living document inside a club, you can see why the environment and the atmosphere in a club would be successful. And you should be really proud of that, because it's, I think that's the mark of a good club, is that athletes will look back on their time and go, you know what, I enjoyed that and I learned something about myself. And they feel a warmth towards the experience that they've had, no matter what the level and what the results, that they go, yeah, I can see the connection with life, rather than it being a punitive experience. So that has been not a revelation in the sense that I'm not surprised, but to see how different coaches do it in different ways is always fascinating, and something that I'm very curious about. When you say about continuing to learn, that's the piece that gets me out in the morning in that sense, is what can I learn about how to do this differently. And jumping around and from international athletes to schoolboys and school kids, or kids who've never even taken a boat out of a boathouse before. And you're actually thinking, how do you put your hands on this and lift it? It really makes you revisit everything that's going on. So I really thank you for your time on that. And I'm sure people will find this fascinating, because you've given us some really good insights into your coaching journey and into the success of your club. So Simon, thank you very much for your time, and I wish you well for the future.
Thank you, and been a pleasure doing so, and wish you well for the future. Thank you.
Cheers, Simon. Thanks a lot.